Willkommen, liebe Zuschauer, zu diesem Video. Anlässlich des Weltfrauentages haben wir heute Sarah Hoskins bei uns zu Gast. Sie ist International Director für Afrika und Europa von OMF. Und weil sie aus Großbritannien kommt, werden wir das Interview auf Englisch führen. Yeah, you're Sarah Hoskins, and we love to have you here at OMF Germany in Mücke. So, yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad for having you here and having this interview with you. My first question is, how did you come to OMF?
Well, I've been part of OMF since 2008, when I was first sent from the UK to serve in Southeast Asia.
Great. Was there a specific life event or any circumstances?
To get to that point, I'd spent many years feeling that God was calling me to serve in a cross-cultural setting. I was actually a medical student when I found out about cross-cultural mission and felt called to that. I hadn't really got an idea of mission. I hadn't grown up in a family that was involved in a church that was engaged in mission. So as a student, I'd heard about God's mission to the nations, and that had really captivated me. So I had actually spent many years doing short-term trips and exploring possibilities. I'd studied medicine, and during time as a medical student and working as a doctor, I went on short-term trips that usually involved medicine and visiting mission hospitals. And I thought that would be the shape of the way I was involved in cross-cultural mission. But actually, during a time at Bible college, God changed direction a little bit, and I realised that if I was going to use medicine, I would want to be involved in something that was moving towards church planting or helping the church grow. So I realised that OMF was an organisation in which I could participate in that. So there was a lot of change along the way and redirection by God. But I ended up with the vision of OMF to contribute to church movements. That was a good fit for where I was coming from.
So that's very interesting. And what brought you to your current position as international director?
There's been a lot of movement since then. I was 10 years in a country in Southeast Asia, and then I returned to the UK for some studies. I was preparing to return to be based in Thailand to take on a role with OMF for supporting people who were developing holistic ministries. And then it was Corona, which meant that I did do that role, but I was doing it virtually. Did eventually get to Thailand for some time and serving OMF in different countries with that role. And then I was approached. They were looking for someone to do this role in Africa and Europe, and I was approached to see if I would do it. And because God was already prompting me to think about what was next, but I hadn't got to the point of thinking that things might change. But I was already open to the possibility of new things. And when I was asked, and I prayed about it, and so I felt this was a good use of my experience in leadership and to be part of what God is doing to reach East Asians in and from Africa and Europe. I'm excited by that.
Tell us a little about your work in Asia and the holistic concept you just mentioned.
Yeah, so it's always been really important to me that the way that we do mission and the way that I would engage in mission would be holistic, and that we're addressing every aspect of life, not only seeking to see spiritual change in people's lives, but actually seeing people's situation and what God might do to change that. So I had been in this country for a few years when I became aware of some of the medical needs, and obviously coming from a background as a medical doctor, I was perhaps more noticing those, but also I knew more medical people, and particularly that there wasn't much being done for people at the end of life. And I continued to pray about that and continued to learn about the situation. I was still learning the language as well, which was challenging, and wanting to know how I might be able to serve in the church setting. But I also knew that because of persecution, a lot of the Christians there had become very focused on doing things in church, but it was much more difficult to engage in communities and do things to serve people in their communities. So after talking to church people doing medical ministries already, we decided that we would develop some training for the local believers to be able to serve people in their community, to help them address things, to help support families who are caring for people at the end of life. The focus of that training was to help people to both show and share Jesus with the people who are at the end of life, and also to support families and be practical help, but also be the salt and light really in those situations.
Okay, thanks for sharing. What is important for your role at OMF? What qualities or interests should you or a person in your position bring?
That's a really good question and quite a hard question. There are lots of ways, because it's very new to me and there's many aspects of it. I think that it's a time that I find that I know that I would want to be dependent on God, but also that I'm forced to be dependent on God because there is so much that I'm learning. And actually, I think it's a good time to be helpless because it's not based on, with using medical qualification for something. I can depend on the things that I've learned and am skilled in. With this new role, there are so many things that I'm learning that I don't yet know. I'm completely dependent on what God can bring. So I think it's good to have a relationship with Him, but also I'm connecting with so many different people that I think it's important to have good relationships with the people I'm working with. And it's really encouraging to find people I haven't worked with before, but we're a fellowship, and that's really lived out with working closely with people for the first time, but that we're already working together as a fellowship and serving God together. So working hard on relationships, and that's something I enjoy, so I guess that's a helpful part of doing this job.
What challenges do you face time and time again?
Yeah, so I think the real challenge of the role that I'm doing is dealing with a whole variety of situations, some of which are good and encouraging and some of which are actually difficult to deal with. So I think the challenge is not always being able to learn from one thing and take it to another. But as I mentioned about working with people, I think that's the continuation of relationships and working together with people on a different new challenge. But I think the challenges are often opportunities as well. There's a lot changing in the way that we're doing mission from the Western countries. And so whilst that is challenging and could discourage us from continuing to play our part in God's mission, there's actually an opportunity there as well to do things differently, to change the ways we're doing things, and finding new ways of reaching East Asia's peoples where we are, not always sending people out to East Asia, but responding to the possibilities and opportunities here.
So what do you value most about your work? Is it like the work with the different people, just you said?
Yeah, I do like that a lot, and I'm someone who likes the relationship, so as I'm building relationships with people that I'm working with, I enjoy that and I value the closeness of those relationships. But I actually also like the variety that we mentioned. The variety of challenges is something that is exciting to me personally. But I think I particularly value that we are serving together to be part of God's mission to the nations, and having one purpose is exciting. I value that.
So are there many female managers at OMF? It's like a change of topic now, but a very big topic. Yeah, tell us about.
Yeah, in the past there have been some female leaders in senior roles, but in 2015 there was a reorganisation in OMF, and the leadership team that I joined last year hadn't had a woman leader as part of it since it formed in 2015. So that was quite a big change. There's actually 2 more colleagues who have since joined who are women. So we're seeing quite a lot of change. There were also a lot of other female leaders across OMF in different ways. But that change has been happening gradually. So it takes a lot of time to develop someone as a leader from the time that they're maybe serving in ministry and over many years being developed as a leader. So I think that I couldn't tell you the percentages, but there's a smaller number of women leaders and managers compared to men. But I can see there's a lot of people from a whole variety of settings and backgrounds and countries who are developing as leaders in lots of different ways, and lots of diversity that we're seeing. And one of OMF's values is we celebrate diversity and unity. And it's good to see that with regards to women, even though there's more to be done as well.
And how do you feel as a woman in leadership?
Yeah, that's a question that has varied from time to time. I am actually been delighted by the way that I have been welcomed. As I said, I was joining a team that was all men, and I thought maybe that could be difficult. But actually they have been very welcoming and have included me as an equal colleague. There have not been issues around me being a woman. But also the thing that I actually really appreciate is that I'm allowed to be a leader in my way, that I think it's really important for women to be leaders who bring a perspective as a woman. I'm a single woman, so I can bring that perspective. So a married woman with children might bring a different perspective as well. So I think celebrating diversity and unity is allowing space for that. And I've been able to see that in my experience as well.
That's great. What advice would you give to women who are in leadership?
Yeah, I think with what I've said about being able to be who you are, and that's not just about being a woman, we have different personalities and different gifts that God has given us. So for anybody, we want to be in the shape that God has made us and is making us to be, even as we all pursue being more like Christ. And part of that is being a woman and being able to bring particular gifts and skills that come from being a woman, both in experience and preferences and personality. So I would advise anyone, of whether a man or a woman, to develop into being the person who God has made them to be, and not to be shaped too much by expectations that maybe some of those expectations might be godly, but sometimes they're social expectations that might not be so good, that are based around gender.
I have one last question. What are 3 wishes you have for OMF for the next few years?
Okay, well, that's great. Well, as an organisation, we are pursuing mission movements in East Asia, so I hope that we can stay focused on that vision. I hope that we can continue to be an organisation that continues to grow in our way that we include people, diversity being so important that we value everyone for who they are, including growing women leaders in that. So yeah, it's my hope that we will see a more interculturally friendly organisation that is able to allow people from whatever background and whatever gender and culture is able to be fully part of that. I think that's a biblical vision. It's not just a vision that I have. I hope that we can work towards that. And then I hope that also in that working together, we want to try and work better across the different places where we work. So the connection that Germany has with the rest of the OMF family can be closer, and so that we don't work in separate groups, but that we are all working together more closely as fellowship. We do that in lots of really great ways already, but that we can see that growing as the world changes, and how we can connect is so much easier. I would love to see that we work more closely together.
Okay, thank you so much for your time and the interview.
It's been good to be with you.
Thank you. Weitere Informationen über OMF findet ihr auf unserer Internetseite.